Bitcoin was born out of a financial crisis. In '08, we saw giant corporate bailouts, quantitative easing, and interest rates plummeting. The cypherpunks for a long time had been trying to create a money that couldn't be controlled, and Satoshi Nakamoto got the ball over the net. And he heavily referenced the crash in the release. He even wrote, "Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks," directly into the Genesis block. For a lot of people who weren't there during the early days of Bitcoin, it may not be as viscerally real to them why Bitcoin created so many impassioned supporters. But the movement really gained a lot of popularity because people were so angry about what was happening to the money supply and with the bailouts. Everything came together for perfect timing, and the crash really contributed to the movement around Bitcoin. Right now, we're in the midst of another financial crisis. The Fed is printing huge amounts of money, interest rates are at zero, and we just spent trillions of dollars on corporate bailouts. We might see a rekindling of that original fervor that got people excited in Bitcoin in the first place. Also central to the cypherpunk ethos was privacy. Without privacy, you can't have a free society. That's why privacy coins are particularly exciting. Mimblewimble is a fascinating privacy protocol, and like Bitcoin, it also had an anonymous creator. I chatted to developer David Burkett about the beginnings of Mimblewimble and why it's important. Mimblewimble appeared on the scene. This white paper was dropped by this anonymous person.
2016, this Tom Elvis Jedusor, which is the French Lord Voldemort, dropped this onion link.
The real French Lord Voldemort dropped an onion link?
I'm certain of it, actually.
They released something called Mimblewimble, which is actually the name of a spell. And it sort of alludes to, it's like a tongue-tying spell.
Brian Bishop and Andrew Poelstra, they start to investigate it some more and realize this is a pretty cool protocol. It has some cool advantages over Bitcoin. I think it was 2017, early in the year, this Ignotus Peveril from Harry Potter also, he started this Rust code base to start developing what he called Bryn. For 2 years, they developed in early 2019, they finally launched the coin. And Mimblewimble obviously has the advantages. It has the privacy, the scalability. Typically, adding privacy to Bitcoin or any kind of cryptocurrency results in a lot of extra data. This actually allows you to remove some of the old data and still validate the whole chain.
Why is privacy so important?
You get fungibility as a result of it. So right now, it wouldn't take much for the Chinese government, for example, to say, don't mine these coins, these are tainted coins. By having privacy, you gain the uncensorability that true cash actually needs. And that's been Grin's whole focus, is being cash, and fungibility is a huge part of that. You're not going to want to use it for your everyday transactions if everything's public. Because it doesn't take much. Once you know, say someone sends me a coin, I could, with fairly high confidence, go track down some of the other purchases they've made. And, I can see the amounts, I can see where they're spending it. Maybe I can't track it down, but chain analysis and things like that almost certainly can. Fighting those kinds of techniques is very hard, but it's necessary for anything that wants to be used for daily cash.
And I think that's the direction we need to go in society. I know that there's a lot of talk at the moment of like, let's just hodl and stack sats and forever just accumulate. And that's not really how this started. We need something that we can use. Like I personally want to take all my data away from credit card companies. I don't want them taking that and packaging it and selling it. I want to be having private transactions in my day-to-day lives and not have all this information broadcast, whether it's broadcast on a public blockchain or whether it's broadcast to these centralized companies that are profiting off my actions. So I think that we do need to change the narrative crypto back to how it was before and start talking about using this. And maybe Mimblewimble could be a path forward in that, in just saying, this is something you could use in your everyday lives. It's private cash.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And that's the real hope. That's why I got involved with crypto. I want to see true usable cryptocurrencies that no government has any control of, or no credit card companies, no Visa telling me what I can and can't buy. I want complete control over my money, and privacy is an important part of that.
And so how does privacy work in Mimblewimble?
Amounts are all hidden. There's no transparent amounts. Every block is basically one big coin join. There's no transaction boundaries. You just take your inputs and you have your outputs and you just combine them all together, and you have no way of separating them at that point. On the network, at the peer-to-peer level, some of that information is still available, and we're working hard to try to obscure that farther. But at least once it gets to a block, you can't go look at the history and learn very much. You can see how many transactions were involved, but you don't know which inputs were, part of those and which outputs or whatever.
Walk me through how the privacy compares to other things in the space.
The biggest privacy coin right now is Monero. It uses ring signatures, which are sort of large. They're kind of bloated. They don't scale near as well, but they have better privacy at the peer-to-peer layer. I mentioned, transactions are kind of broadcast as is for now in Grin. But once they're in the block, the anonymity set is much larger, potentially much better than Monero. But Monero, the anonymity set's always 7, I believe. It's always however many, in the ring signature. Zcoin, which has changed a lot over its past and is fairly recently announced Lulantis, which is a pretty cool improvement. It sort of takes what Grin has without the pruning, takes it one step farther, has one more blinding factor involved, but ends up getting a lot closer to Zcash levels of privacy without the fancy moon map. Beam is actually trying to combine aspects of Mimblewimble and Lulantis.
What makes Mimblewimble more scalable than some of these other coins out there?
You just need to add up all the unspent outputs and make sure that there's no unexpected inflation. You don't need to worry about all the spent stuff. So you can, once you spend a coin, you can delete those outputs and still validate the history just fine.
You have Grin and you have Beam, which are two implementations of the same Mimblewimble white paper. So is there some sort of a rivalry between Beam and Grin? And what are some of the major differences there?
It's a friendly rivalry.
Good.
Yeah, I work pretty closely with some of the Beam devs. And we learn a lot from each other. The big difference is Beam is a company of the first, few years, 5 years, I assume. 20% of the coins mined go to the Beam Foundation and whatever the company and investors and stuff like that. So it's sort of a Zcash style setup there. But because of that, they have extra resources to develop. So they've kind of outpaced development on certain things. Definitely more user friendly. You grab their wallets; they're very nice. Very very clean feeling. Mimblewimble is unique in that you have to actually interact with the receiver. There's no address. You don't just like post your address somewhere and someone sends you coins. You have to be involved in that transaction. It's kind of a nuisance. They've developed something that allows you to do it sort of asynchronously. You can do one part of it, and then someone can come back and receive it later, and then there's another step to finalize. And you don't have to be on at the same time. And Grin has something similar that's a little more centralized called Grinbox, but it's basically just encrypted storage. But they've based their whole model on that. They've actually built addresses sort of to identify your little drop boxes on the SVBS system. Another difference is Beam has decoy outputs. It's to try to fight that peer-to-peer level privacy leakage. They both have Dandelion, which is to sort of obscure the origin of a transaction before the broadcast stage, as it's still hopping along what are called the Dandelion stems. You can aggregate transactions, combine them before having to broadcast to obscure some. If there's no transaction sitting there, they'll go and actually add fake outputs. Because of that, their blockchain's a little bit larger. Grin scales better. They probably have better privacy for now, but it's very interesting. They have definitely. It's just a bunch of little things that really separate the two.
What is the inflation schedule like for Grin?
There will be 1 Grin per second forever. As time goes on, the inflation percentage decreases.
I look forward to seeing what happens and following their journey.
Oh yeah, I enjoy being a part of it. It's great.
Thanks so much for chatting with me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like, share and subscribe. And a huge shout out to all the members of NBTV. It's because of you that I can keep this channel going. So thank you so much for your support. If you'd like to become a member of NBTV also, so you get access to all kinds of exclusive members only videos, then sign up at naomibrockwell.com/memberships.